It's time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 140 of the Property Podcast. I'm Rob B. With me as always is Rob D. Hey Rob, how are you today?
Yep, really well, thank you Rob. Really well. Today we are talking lessons learned from running a letting agent. So as you'll know if you're a regular listener to the podcast, we about 18 months ago started a company called Yellow Lettings. We mention it in passing every so often, but in this episode, we're really going to give you a behind-the-scenes look into what's been going on and what we've learned in the process. So it should be a really interesting one. It's also got the potential, Rob, for being a really long one, because whenever we talk about ourselves, these episodes do tend to run a bit long. So normally at the start of these episodes, we talk about what we've been up to this week, but I suggest we skip that and get straight into the news story.
I agree. But what I would say, if you're thinking, oh God, they're going to talk about how brilliant they are and how brilliant Yellow Lettings is, you'll be very, very surprised. It's a real honest account what we're going to dig into. So make sure you stay listening because I think you'll learn a lot and actually be maybe not surprised by our honesty because we are pretty open guys, but it continues today. We're not going to suddenly close up shop because we're talking about our own stuff. We're going to be really brutal, really honest and go straight into it. But before we open up that can of worms, let's go into our news story of the week. And Rob, we're talking about London for a change.
Well, yeah, we do keep talking about it, but that's because everyone else keeps talking about it. I said it last week, but every time I speak to an investor, whether it's at a meetup or the summit or just like a casual chat, the topic of London always comes up. I was up in Nottingham doing some viewings last week and all the agents I was speaking to were asking me about what I was seeing down in London. So it's on everyone's mind, even if it's not directly relevant to them. And it's being stoked by lots of reports that are coming out at the moment. There's one which we'll link to in the show notes, which is by UBS, that put out a report a couple of weeks ago saying that London is the most overvalued city in the world. If you are a local and you want to live in London, it's incredibly unaffordable. That's not really news, is it? Only Hong Kong is less affordable. So this UBS report, which we'll link to, the show notes this week are thepropertyhub.net/lettings lessons. The report's worth a look because it compares lots of different global cities by all these different metrics. And it kind of makes you think that it's easy to say, oh, well, you know, London's a global city. Of course, it's expensive. But then there are other global cities like New York in there, which are not overvalued according to the metrics they use. So it's really interesting. We could talk about this for ages, but instead we've decided to do a whole episode next week on what's next for London, because I think it does deserve to have a bit of a full treatment. It's not like we've got the answer where all these massive research institutes have failed, but we have got our own thoughts on it. So we've hinted in the past at our thoughts, but I think it probably makes sense to lay them out in full and our reasons behind it in an episode next week.
Yeah, so there you go. You already know what's coming next week, but this week's topic is going to be a good one too. So Rob, let's get back in a time machine and go back to the summer of 2014. Sounds like a Bryan Adams song. But we're not going to sing, we're going to talk. So Yellow Lettings, the journey so far.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't been following along as we did this, we started Yellow Lettings in round about the summer of 2014. It was an idea that we'd had for quite a long time. We've got our own portfolios, and in the course of doing that, I mean, I've done a bit of self-management in the past, but I've used a lot of agents as well. Rob, you've used plenty of agents in the past, as well as using agents through RMP. And we thought there was a bit of a gap for the type of investor that we are, and the type of investor that we know a lot of. There was something that we wanted that was missing, wasn't there? Yeah,
there was. Professionally and personally, we had massive pain points because we've talked about the benefits of building your portfolio around the country. We both have always done that. It's not something we started after Yellow. We were already doing it. But the challenge that we were having is that we could go to one area and have a great experience with an agent, and go to the next area, maybe even use the same company and have a terrible experience. And it wasn't consistent throughout. And that was a real pain point for us personally, but also professionally. RMP, we were going to different areas and we were passing on business to different letting agents once we'd sourced the investment, and really relied heavily on a third party to deliver service, which could make us look great or make us look awful, and sometimes making us look awful through no fault of our own. So this was a massive pain point. And I remember sitting in my back garden, Rob, and it was quite a pleasant day, and rabbiting on to you for ages how great it was going to be. And you always know when I invite you for coffee for something, you know, I'm going to get excited about a topic and it's going to be more work. But thankfully, this project, you were just as keen, and that's where it started. And it went really well, really quickly, because we are super fortunate that the podcast, the hub, so all the listeners, all the people who are on the hub, as I said, the RMP investors, that we had plenty of business straight from the off. And actually, we got to 70, 80 properties even overnight.
Yeah, we did. It's funny to say. I'd actually completely forgotten about that meeting we had. But yeah, that is how it started. And we sort of spent a lot of time planning it. And yeah, because of the reach we've got, we almost immediately kind of got to the kind of scale that any other agency would be very jealous of. We're really lucky in that regard. What we could have done, and I think what we wanted to do, was to just go for it. It was really tempting to just keep on expanding, be in multiple different areas, take on everything we could get our hands on, and just grow it. Because, you know, let's face it, that's the fun part, growing a business. But we were very conscious that we started Yellow for a reason, and the reason was to do a better job than the other agents that we experienced. So if we just had our own massive agency that was also not doing a good job, there wouldn't really be a lot of point. And in the course of managing this first set of properties, we found challenges in our business model. Ironically, a lot of them were to do with other agents, which is probably the great irony of the whole thing. But we made other mistakes as well, and just we set things up in a way that weren't quite optimal. We just knew that we weren't delivering what we wanted to. We had people telling us that we weren't delivering what we should be, but we knew that ourselves. Because we are our own clients as well. So what we decided to do, rather than try to grow and change at the same time, we took a decision around about February, March time in 2015 to take a pause. We took a 6-month break from taking on new properties, and we completely changed our focus to something that we called internally Yellow 2.0. So we sent an email out to all our current clients, telling them what was coming, basically saying, yes, we know that some things are going very well, but there are also these things where we know that we're falling short, and here's what we're doing about it. And come September, we're going to have Yellow 2.0 up and running, and this is what we're going to do. And it was a difficult thing to do, because it's hard to turn down business, and that's effectively what we were doing. We're saying no more growth. We're going to get this right. Well, I won't spoil it. I'll let you talk about what we did, Rob, but I do think it's probably the most important decision we've made so far to actually do that.
You're right. It was the pain of not taking on the business. But the bigger pain for us was letting some people down, because we're really proud of the stuff we put out. You know, hopefully you think the podcast is a great resource and it's really well done. Hopefully you think the same with the Property Hub and the books. So we take a lot of time to put the effort into all these things and hopefully deliver a really good product. And when people then came to Yellow, and people were having great experiences in some cases, but being really honest, in some cases a poor experience, it was really painful to have conversations with those people who'd experienced great things with us all the way through, and then suddenly were starting to feel let down by us. Now, there were some really difficult conversations. So while turning down business may sound difficult to do, having those conversations was far more difficult. The Yellow 2.0 was huge, and we didn't just go, oh, we might do a few little tweaks. We pretty much overhauled the business, including the business model on how we'll work. So there's loads we can go into, and we'll come into the lessons, both property and business, shortly. But things we changed were like our whole operating system, so the software we used. We went to a far more expensive piece of software which could do a lot more. We took on a lot of staff. We pretty much doubled our staffing numbers overnight. We brought in brand new systems. So we've got a whole new management system now on how we work, built on Trello, I'm pleased to say, for all our Trello fans out there. And it's going absolutely brilliantly, the Trello system we've set up now. And the changes the clients experienced, I'm sure they can't talk today, but they'll be able to vouch for how different it feels already. And the experience for the clients, new clients coming in, which we'll talk about in a bit, the clients we're already looking after, and our other clients, our tenants, are all happier. We record the happiness of the people we work with, and every week we get great reviews. And it happens via email. We've got a little, are you happy or unhappy or in the middle? And we're getting great reviews week in, week out. It's not just one or two. We're getting 10 plus every single week, happy people. And I think we've had, 2 negative comments in months. And considering you're dealing with tenants, that's pretty impressive. So it wasn't always that way. And we've made a lot of changes to get there. But we've said we've got a lot of things wrong. But if we're going to give ourselves any credit, we are doers. When we see something that needs doing, we didn't decide to just tweak it. We just overhauled.
Yeah, it absolutely needed to be done because there were very painful things going on. And is it perfect now? Well, no, of course it's not. But we have a lot of indicators that we measure on a weekly basis, and all of those indicators are showing a dramatic improvement. And it just the whole business feels different. It feels different to us. I know it feels different for the staff who've been with us for a long time. And as you said, we're seeing a big difference in the kind of the things that come back. And it's difficult with tenants because a lot of the time they're having a bad experience in ways that are not strictly within our control. There are times when we have to deliver bad news because there are things that, for example, the block management company should be doing that they haven't done, and they're having a bad time, and we're basically powerless in that situation. But there are ways of communicating that and dealing with it, and that's where I think we're doing really well. And the fact that we're getting often really positive comments for people who are still in a negative situation speaks volumes for our team, really. So dramatic improvements, and now we're back in growth mode, and we'll talk about what our plans are for the future later on. But let's talk about the lessons then. And let's start out by talking about the property lessons. Because as I've said, we've know a lot of stuff from our own portfolios and from talking to other investors, but we've learned a lot more from dealing with, as I've said, hundreds of tenancies so far. The first thing that I'll mention is that I think, well, it's really just confirmed what we already knew, which is that properties in the best locations go fastest. That's not news. We've said it all along, but the extent to which this is true is just amazing.
Yeah, you're right. It's. I don't think many people are going to be falling out their seats or collapsing on the tube listening to that one, but it's true, and it's just been reinforced by a very exaggerated experience for us, because not only are we looking at our own portfolios, we're looking at a lot of investors' portfolios as well. So we're getting all these lessons magnified, and a lesson that might surprise many people is that because they get a lot of bad press, but tenants, Rob, are pretty good in the majority, easy to deal with, lovely people. We've been tenants ourselves. We'd like to think we're nice people, and if the communication is good, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority, are excellent. It's only a small minority that let others down, but that's exactly the same with landlords. It's only a minority that let the tenants down. So in the whole, while it makes interesting reading to talk about terrible tenants and how they behave, actually, most tenants are lovely. Yeah,
they are. And as I've said, they will put up with a lot if the communication is good. So we're dealing a lot of the time with new build properties. And when you get a property that's completely new, however well it's been constructed, there will be those last issues. So when someone moves into a property for the first time, there will be bits and pieces that need doing. And tenants, on the one hand, are aware that they've got a really nice brand new property, but on the other, they'll have these bits and pieces that are just annoying for them. And often we can't do anything about it. But they will put up with that as long as they feel like you care, and you're not just fobbing them off. So they do put up with a lot. On the other hand, I will say that some tenants are challenging, and the challenges that we've mostly had have been with tenants we've inherited. So we've taken on some situations where rather than putting in our own tenants, there are already tenants in there that we've taken over. And I would say that the majority of the challenges that we've had with tenants have been with the ones that we've inherited, where had we had the choice, we wouldn't have put those tenants in there. They wouldn't have got through our referencing procedure. It just shows how important good referencing is, because it's just unbelievable. Like with exactly the same property, we have properties, we have blocks, and so we'll have properties that are next door to each other, and one will be no bother at all, and next door will just be every day there's something else to deal with, and it's purely down to the tenant that's in there. So getting the referencing right, being discerning about who you put in there, doing that at the start just saves so much work later on. Again and again, it's something we've said from the start, but actually seeing it on the front line has really rammed that home for me.
So many property lessons that we talk about are prevention rather than cure. And we often talk about, if you do this, you minimise your risk. And that's just a prime example. There's so many examples, but good referencing is absolutely critical. Admin and paperwork, Rob, is another thing. It's not our favourite topic or task, and luckily we don't have to do it, but members of our team do, and they have to do a lot of it, and there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of things that need to be done, there's a lot of time scales that need to be met for certain bits of paperwork and procedures, and it's not easy, and actually it's probably getting harder. The lesson here is, if you're doing it yourself, are you doing it all? And if you're using your agent, are you confident they're doing it all? You know, we're pretty big on it, and we get alerts to new things coming in. But sometimes it amazes me on our calls, our management calls, when, and there's this now, and I'm like, another thing is like, and we've mentioned many of them on the podcast, but landlords, investors are being asked to jump through more and more hoops. It seems all the time. It doesn't seem like the work is getting less. It seems like it's getting more, which is fine if you've got procedures, but you just need to be aware of them to set the procedures up. And I think that's part of the challenge. So paperwork is a major challenge for all property investors, and it has been for us.
Yeah, and the tricky thing about it is you don't necessarily know if you're doing it wrong or if your agent's doing it wrong, because a lot of the time you will get away with it. So a lot of the things that have changed recently have been around evictions, and it's made it harder to use the Section 21 procedure, which is like the accelerated way of getting a tenant out, if you failed to do XYZ, ABC, and loads of other different things at the start and got things correct the whole way through. Now, a lot of the time, if you ask a tenant to leave, they will just leave, and they won't challenge it all the way through the courts. So you won't get to the point of finding out that, you didn't do this, therefore you're not going to be able to get the court order to get the tenant out. And because of that, you'll get situations where you have an agent that isn't doing things properly, but they'll get away with it a lot of the time. So it doesn't really come out until it comes to crunch time. But I think that a lot of agents and a lot of landlords are probably not doing a lot of this stuff either, because they don't know about it. These changes will just come in without much publicity, or that they'll just miss things because there's a lot of it. There's just so much paperwork, and I know I'm going on about it, but it's just really scary. If you just use a kind of a national chain and you've got some kind of big brand name, you'd think that they'd know what they were doing. But if they've got sales and lettings, the people in lettings aren't that excited to be there, and the paperwork needs to be done on a Saturday for the tenant to be moved in, so they get the Saturday boy to do it. You could easily find things going wrong. So I think as a landlord, it's important to either make sure that you know how to do it yourself, or at least know enough to check that your agent is doing it properly. But anyway, enough about paperwork. Let's talk about maintenance instead. That's exciting. We've seen a lot of maintenance issues as well. Yeah, not a lot to say about that, except the importance of just reacting quickly and getting it sorted. Because again, if there's something wrong, it's not going to get any better in a couple of weeks' time. And I think we're lucky in the most part. Our landlords are very responsive. They understand the importance of just getting things done, spending the money or whatever it is. Washing machines and minor leaks, we have discovered, are the things that seem to happen all the time. We have sort of many and various things that crop up, and you can be having a nice quiet day and then suddenly something bizarre will come out of nowhere. But there always seems to be washing machines and some kind of leak on the go. I don't know why.
Or it's more evil, brother Rob. Washer dryers.
Oh, washer dryers.
They love breaking.
They do. But I think these days it's quite hard to get away with not supplying one. So there's not a great deal you can do about it. It's just super annoying.
Yeah, if you've got the space, go for a washing machine and a dryer. I know it sounds like you buy more, but you tend to find, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but I did work at Curry's, so I have got some experience here. A long time ago. Washer dryers, I'd say, expect 2 to 3 years out of them, and washing machines, around about 5, maybe to 7 if you're lucky, if you've gone for a good one. So they last about half as long, but if you have got the space, I'd go for a washing machine and a dryer any day. It's the water with the machinery. The dryers will last, 10 years. The washing machines won't last as long, but washer dryers, because it's a combo with the two, they just seem to break more regularly. So maybe when you're doing your plans, if you've got a washer dryer, say every 2.5 years, you're going to have to need a new one. And the thing is, once they start breaking, the call-out charges and all the rest of it, I know we're a bit of a throwaway society, but just throw it out and get another one. Because once they start, it's just ongoing. You'll find it's another thing, and you'll end up buying a new one, and you wish you'd done that straight away. So, not the biggest lesson you're ever going to get from the Property Podcast, but it's worth knowing.
So you're not going to try and upsell us on the warranty at this point?
Well, actually, if you're going to get warranty... Oh, no. I'm slipping back.
Let's move on.
Onwards to business lessons. Now, this is something we could talk about a lot, Rob, and we could probably do 10 podcasts on this, but we're not, because it is the Property Podcast. We're just going to give you a few, because I know there are listeners who are interested in this, and plus, property is a business, so I'm sure there are parallels and lessons that could be taken from it, but we've certainly learnt a lot.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson to take from this, which applies to property and applies to pretty much anything else, is that, yes, we got a lot wrong. We've talked about the mistakes that we made and how we basically had to hit reset on the whole thing at one point. But the thing is, there's no way that we could have got it right from the start without having the experience first. It's not like we didn't do enough planning, and had we just thought about it enough, we could have nailed it 100% from the start. It's just impossible. You need to actually do it and have the experience, make the mistakes and learn from them. See the patterns of the things that crop up that cause you problems and course correct as you go along in order to get it right. I think that's the absolute key. It happens in property, and you see it in everything else as well. People feel like they need to know everything before they get started. The obvious result of that is that they lose out on years when they could have been actually doing things and learning, or they never actually get the confidence to start in the first place. And I think this is something that we do, we do it all the time. We started this podcast when we didn't have a clue what we were doing. The first 10 episodes are probably quite painful for all concerned. We started a magazine from scratch without knowing anything about publishing, and we just do something and then correct along the way. Now, with lettings, obviously, that it's not an easy one to take that approach, and you don't want to just leap in being totally clueless, because you're dealing with people's assets and you're dealing with people's homes. So it's not like we just came up with an idea and did it the next day. We had, from the word go, we made sure that we had our first employee who was highly experienced, and so she would make sure that whatever we messed up, things were still going reasonably well. But we just needed to get started. And that, for me, is the number one lesson of the whole thing.
Yeah, so many people in property and business just don't do it. They don't start. And starting may seem hard and scary, but actually, most things can be sorted. Most things can be resolved. Most things can be fixed. So, yeah, as long as you see the pain points and you learn from mistakes and you fix things, actually, just do it. And I believe there's a big company that uses that tagline, but that's what you want to do. Just do it. Just go. A big lesson, it's something that's talked about in business a lot, but what gets measured gets improved. And that's super, super important. It's something that we're still working on today. We're gathering more and more KPIs, so key performance indicators. There's lots and lots of data within any business, and it includes property businesses. And if you monitor that data and those performances, then you can tweak things to improve it. But if you don't measure it, how are you ever going to know your changes have improved things? So it's something we've done a lot more of, and we'll do even more of in the future, because it's a saying that's used a lot for a reason, because it's true.
Yeah, definitely. And once you know what you're measuring and what your outputs are and what your desired results are, then you need to have two things to bring those about. You need great people and you need great systems. And it's the systems that we had the massive overhaul of this year and made a real difference to the business. Because we've had great people from the start. We've hired more great people over the last few months, and we've increased our staffing a lot as well, which is helpful because there was a volume issue as well. But we've always had great people, and I think if there's one thing that we've done right, it's hiring. And I've always said, whenever we've had things that aren't going very well, I've always said to people, like, if you're having any shortcomings with Yellow, don't blame the team. Blame me personally, because they're just doing the best with what they've got, and they're very experienced and they're just brilliant people to work with. But even the best people will only be 50% as effective, if that, without the right systems to follow. And that's, again, a case of you can't just kind of sit down and out of the blue, before you've done anything, design the perfect system. We put things in place that we thought would work. They fell down in various ways. And from that, we were able to design systems that now do work really, really well. And we've just seen the exact same people get radically better results because they've had the improved technology and the improved processes to follow. So getting those two things, the people and the systems, getting those two things right is critical. And once you improve one, it improves the other. So you can't just design the perfect system and get any old idiot to run it. And you can't just hire a genius and leave them to it. Getting the two right is the key to making a business run as effectively as it needs to.
Yeah, and when I had those challenging conversations, Rob, I used to say exactly the same thing. Don't blame me, blame Rob D. Which is great when you've got a business partner. Of course, I'm kidding. So we've learned a lot, as hopefully that's come across in this podcast. We've learned a lot about property. Really exaggerated and highlighted certain lessons we already knew, which is great, and our beliefs have been, enforced even more. And we can talk, and it helps us to talk in this podcast, because not only are we dealing with our own portfolios, we're dealing with hundreds, and then through RMP probably thousands of investors. So we've got a lot of hands-on experience talking to investors on a daily basis and living their portfolios with them. So we've learned a lot, which is great, which allows us to do things like the podcast. Does that mean we're now fault-free and never will make a mistake again? Of course not. We'll make mistakes from time to time. But hopefully the big ones that we used to make are all eradicated. And if we do make little errors here and there now, we can fix them. We can change our systems. We can tweak things, because we know that if you take action quickly and effectively, the problem can be removed altogether, not just once, but then ongoing. We could talk a lot more about the property side. We could talk even more about the business side, because we don't talk about business that often, and there's been lots and lots of lessons there. But I think, Rob, we can close up by saying, let us know what you want. Because if you want to learn more about the business lessons, or you want more about the property lessons, or there's a different angle, you talked about this in Yellow, and that'd be really interesting to hear more about what you did there, let us know. We'd love to hear more. Yeah,
we love talking about the business stuff, but we're aware that you're here to hear about property. But if you do want to know more about the business, or any particular aspect of the business, let us know in the Property Hub, thepropertyhub.net/forum. Let us know, or email us. We'll be really happy to talk about this stuff more on the podcast if there is the demand to do so. But let's just finish up a little bit by talking about our plans for the future then, or rather our plans for the present, because we said that we sort of took a pause, got everything right, or as right as we can for now, and then we're back into growth mode. And the way that is manifesting itself right now is we're doing what a lot of people have been asking us for the last 18 months, which is, are you operating in London?
And we are, at last. It sounds crazy. Why haven't we operated in London? But we hadn't felt ready. And it's cost us revenue, but now we are. And now we're more than ready, and we're eager, and we've just started taking the first properties on in London now. So there are lots of areas we already cover. So we already cover across the majority of the Northwest, a majority of Yorkshire, a chunk of the Midlands. but we hadn't really ventured down south. So London and possibly the home counties in the near future we'll be ploughing into now and building out a lot more properties in the Yellow portfolio from there. So if you do have a property that you'd like managed by Yellow, by all means get in touch. It's yellowlettings.net. We'd love to help and take you. And luckily, you've not had to go through the first part of the experience, and now you get the Yellow 2.0 experience.
Yep, exactly. So the link to the website and the links to everything else that we are talking about today are going to be in the show notes, which this week are at thepropertyhub.net/lettingslessons. Also, will be a link to this week's resource of the week. And I've just popped this one in here without really telling you what it is. So I should probably explain it to you as well, Rob, shouldn't I?
You should. It sounds like a radio station, but I'm guessing it's a bit more than that.
Yeah, it's called Brain.fm. Brain.fm. It sounds a bit nuts to talk about, so I'm going to try not to sound too new age here, but the idea is that it's music that you listen to that's scientifically proven to help you accomplish certain things. So what I use it for is concentration. So you put it on, it lasts for half an hour, and it's supposedly it sounds just like kind of ambient new agey kind of music, but apparently there are things going on in there that are embedded in there which aid with your concentration. There are also slightly different variations of it which are supposed to help you to sleep and relax and all that kind of thing. But I've been using it for concentration for the last couple of weeks, and it could just be a placebo effect. I don't know, but it really works. I've been working on editing my book, and I normally really struggle with editing. I find it really boring. I'm always wandering off to do other things. But with this, I can just put it on for half an hour and I do not think about anything else. I just get right into it. So I don't know. I'd say it's worth checking out. It's not free, but you get to listen to a certain number for free to see if it's right for you or not. I think if concentration is something that you struggle with, and I think these days it probably is for most people, it's worth checking out. You just don't know.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to a resource we've mentioned before, Focus at Will, which again used to be free, and then they started a charging platform now as well. But a little sneaky hack for you: if you Google Focus at Will YouTube, they've actually put all of the stuff on the YouTube channel. So I still use Focus at Will via their YouTube channel. So if you want to try out for free something similar, then try that first. But Brain.fm, I'll definitely check it out, Rob, and have a look. So coming up, we're going to talk about next week's topic and what we're going to cover. Before we do, let's please applause our incredible listener, Noam, because Noam has left us a lovely 5-star review. And he says, so you thought you were going to just have a quick listen, grab a tip or two about property investment? Think again. You just stumbled upon a bonanza of actionable ideas on how to start and boost your portfolio, business and life in general. Make no mistake, Rob and Rob are the Tyler Durden of the property world, making the path to financial independence slightly more visible to whoever's wise enough to join them and in their tribe. Keep it up. Well, the first rule about the podcast, Rob, is tell everybody about the podcast.
Oh, I was just about to make that joke. You beat me to it.
It's just cheese central. Right. It's like we're competing for bad gags. All right, Rob, what's the second rule?
The second rule of the property podcast is listen next week. Well, I gave it away earlier, but it's what's next for London. As I've said, it's a topic that everyone's asking. It's something that we've got a lot of opinions on. We're going to cover it briefly at the start today, but it deserves a whole episode of its own. So if you invest in London, or you're thinking about investing in London, or you're just interested, because let's face it, what happens in London does affect the rest of the country and to an extent the rest of the world, have a listen, and we'll give you our views on what you can expect in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think whether you plan to invest in the medium, short term, long term, or never, everyone loves talking about the market because there's so much going on and it's so crazy, the London market. So should be a really good episode. Looking forward to that one. So until next week, we'll be back with episode 141. We'll be back on Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob, and then we'll be back with the Property Podcast next Thursday, as always. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.